If you grew up as a kid in America, you are sure to have heard these sayings around food. I remember my dad always saying, eat when there's food available. In a family of four kids, wasn't always the case. I also had a grandpa who served 20 years in the military, and he would always say, if you put it on your plate, you got to eat it. So, found myself at Thanksgiving finishing the entire plate. Then there's the classic, there are starving children in Africa. And because there are people halfway around the world suffering, you need to make sure that you eat your food as well. And while these sayings do have good intentions around them to not waste food, to make sure that you are well fed, they inevitably led to me and a lot of other people creating a relationship with food where they need to overconsume. This chart right here from Business Insider is a great example of how we overconsume food in America. 2,800 in 1961 to 3,600 in 2013. It's 2024 now, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is closer to 4,000. And a lot of people want to say it's sugar or it's fats or it's seed oils. And while those do increase the palatability of food, making them easier to overeat, at the end of the day, we just eat too many damn calories. So in this video, I want to address the four most common phrases that I remember having growing up and give you a different perspective on it so that you can work on your portion control, lose the gut, and ultimately get healthier. So the first one that I can still hear to this day is my dad saying, eat when there is food available. As I mentioned, I got a family of 6. We grew up in a household with 4 kids. I was the oldest. We're all playing sports. We're all running around to different activities. And so when there was dinner on the table, you had to eat. And what it did is it created this mindset around food won't always be available. So get it while you can. And that leads to reaching and grabbing as much as possible, stuffing it on your plate. And then it's on your plate. So you got to finish it. You got to gorge yourself because you don't know when food's going to be available next. But here's the thing. It's 2024. Food is readily available. We can pull it up on our phones and have it delivered to our door. We can walk down the street and go to a grocery store. We can go and get fast food in 10 seconds. The idea that food might not be available, sure, in the 1800s, that makes sense. You go and kill a buck, and then that's something that your family's eating for the next few weeks. So eat when it's available because you don't know when the next meal is coming. But for most people, the next meal is coming 10 feet from you because you can just walk into the pantry, or you're 3 hours away from eating. And so just breaking this belief of eating when there's food available will help you stop when you've had 2 slices. You don't need a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, and eighth. You might have a treat or something that was a real big treat growing up, and now you can go and buy that whenever you want. And this is something that I really had to work on with a wife who's 130 pounds. She'll see me going in and competing for this food, and she's like, I'm not going to eat it. You're good. You don't have to eat the entire plate. And so recognizing that food is readily available. It's okay if you only eat 2 or 3 of the hors d'oeuvres that you see at a wedding, because you'll go to another wedding and there will be someone else 10 minutes later that comes around with that plate of hors d'oeuvres. The next one cracks me up, and it is that there are starving children in Africa, so you need to eat more food. There are people all over the world that are starving, and there are people all over the world dealing with things that are completely different from starving. And I guarantee you, they're not in Africa saying, there are obese people in America, we need to make sure we eat more or less. It just has nothing to do with it. And if you do actually want to help starving kids in Africa, you eating more food won't help. You can donate money or time, or actually go to Zimbabwe and actually help people. But to use that as an example as to why you need to overindulge and have 1,000 extra calories, it's just kind of this weird saying that gets perpetuated for years and years and years. And we just use it as a justification or excuse to overeat. This next one's going to ruffle some feathers, but it's this saying and belief, oh, I got to finish the food that I bought first. And it has everything to do with the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you start a book doesn't mean you have to finish it if the book sucks. If you start a movie and you realize this movie kind of sucks, you don't have to continue spending 2 hours watching it. Disney sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into The Acolyte. And guess what? They didn't renew a season 2 because it didn't make sense to keep doing that. And at the end of the day, there's no reason to hold on to habits or food or beliefs that got you to a point to where you're looking in the mirror and you're not proud of who you see. Number 4 is one that I picked up from my grandpa. I see a lot of dads really struggling with this one because it's the idea of not wasting food. My grandpa would always say, if you put it on your plate, you finish it. Or if it's on your plate, you got to clear your plate. And a lot of dads will see their kids leaving food, or they'll see little scraps left from dinner, and 1 bite, 2 bites, 3 bites. Next thing you know, they've had an entire meal of leftovers from their family members when they had their entire meal themselves. And this is very much like the idea, eat when there's food available. It's making sure that you clear everything. Because if you don't, you might not get enough energy. You might not have enough energy. In my grandpa's experience in the war or growing up in the Great Depression, you might not know when the next meal is coming. But it's okay if you are full to throw away 200, 300, 400 calories of food that you didn't eat. I know that that might be controversial because you're wasting food. In the long run, it's going to end up being one, more expensive, two, worse for you in the long run if you have to have a bypass surgery or if you have to go on blood pressure medication. That's going to be much more expensive than the $2 or $3 of food that you threw out. And so just because you put it on your plate doesn't mean that you need to lick that plate clean. Honestly, I'm talking to myself on this one for so many years where you're licking that plate because one, it probably tasted really good, but two, just this idea that everything needs to be cleared. I remember going to work dinners. The people taking us out would have credit card that they could spend whatever they wanted to for client dinners. And so we would just get every single appetizer, every single entree. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't waste this food. And I would either package it up or I would eat as much until my stomach was absolutely bulging. But you don't have to get to that point. If you are full, and at this point, I'm circling the wagon here. If you are full, you don't need to keep eating. You could throw the food away. You don't need to keep overeating and going over your portion control sizes just because there's food on the plate or on a dish. So at the end of the day, these phrases are sayings that get baked into our beliefs. It's really hard to overcome an operating set of beliefs, values, and identity that you might have around food. And so what I would encourage you to do if you're trying to actively work on this, or if you're trying to question these thoughts, is next time you hear yourself saying this or someone else says this, just think to yourself, is that true? What if the opposite was true? What if I didn't have to eat when there's food available because there's food always available? What if eating more food has nothing to do with starving children in Africa? And just really start to question those things that you've always said. Because if you've always said that, well, this belief and this habit has probably always been there as well. So if you can address the underlying beliefs, values, and identity you have around food, that will address your actions. That will address your habits. Your habits then can lead to a place to where you've got a better outcome, something that's healthier, something you're more confident in. And it starts with how you think about food. If you found this helpful, drop a comment and drop a like. I'll catch you guys in the next video.